I'm Clyde. If you're new here, I'm glad you found me. And if you've been here before, welcome back. I tend to end up in places like this. Not important places. Not places where history makes a lot of noise. Just quiet corners of time. Right now, I'm standing in Paris. It's the 1920s, though no one nearby seems particularly concerned about the year. Paris rarely is. Before we settle in too much, let me tell you something gently, while you're still awake enough to hear it. If you'd like to, you can tap the like button now, and maybe subscribe. That way you don't have to remember later, when your eyes are heavier and your thoughts start drifting sideways. I have a whole playlist full of these little journeys. Boring ones, uneventful ones, the kind where not much happens. And that's sort of the point. They're all waiting for you whenever you feel like wandering again. And if you ever decide to become a channel member, you're not just helping keep these stories going. You also get something a little quieter in return, a personalized, sleepy story, told by me. Just for you. No rush on that either. Nothing around here ever hurries. Tonight, I'm supposed to be delivering a Valentine, a simple envelope, nothing dramatic, no declarations shouted from balconies. I had an address. At some point, I'm fairly certain I folded it carefully. I remember smoothing the paper twice. Once for neatness, and once because it felt polite. But Paris has a way of rearranging things. Streets curve when you aren't looking. Cafés multiply quietly, and directions become more like suggestions. Somewhere between a lamppost and a bakery window, the address stopped existing. So I did the reasonable thing. I found a café. There's a small round table just inside, close enough to the window to watch the street without being part of it. The chair wobbles a little, but not enough to complain about. I order tea. Not coffee. Tea feels more patient. The envelope stays with me, resting in my hand, waiting without asking questions. Outside, Paris keeps moving. Inside, everything slows down. If you're comfortable, you can settle in now. There's no need to go anywhere. I'll tell you what happens next. The cafe smells like warm bread and something faintly sweet, though I can't tell if that's pastry or just the idea of pastry lingering in the air. Paris does that sometimes. Makes you believe in food that may no longer exist. The tea arrives in a small white cup with a thin crack running down one side. Not enough to leak, just enough to suggest it's been through things. I like cups like that. They don't pretend to be new. I wrap my hands around it even though it's still too hot to drink. The warmth travels slowly, as if it's stopping to admire the scenery on the way to my fingers. Outside the window, a man pauses to light a cigarette. He pats his pockets twice before finding his matches. When he finally gets the flame going, he looks pleased, not triumphant, just quietly satisfied. That seems to be the mood of the decade. The 1920s in Paris are supposed to be loud. Jazz spilling out of doorways, artists arguing about paint, writers hunched over notebooks, pretending not to notice each other. And all of that is here, somewhere. But right now, in this cafe, the noise has softened, like someone turned it down without asking permission. At the table next to mine, a woman stirs her drink far longer than necessary. She isn't distracted. She's thinking. I can tell by the way the spoon never quite touches the edge of the cup. There's a small dog curled under her chair. Gray. Might once have been white. He snores lightly, with complete confidence that nothing important will happen without him. I admire that kind of certainty. A waiter passes by carrying a tray with exactly one croissant on it. Just one. It feels intentional, like someone made a decision and stuck with it. I glance down at the envelope in my hand. The paper is smooth. Thicker than it needs to be. Whoever wrote it cared about how it would feel before it was opened. That's always been my favorite part of letters. The before. I try to remember the address again, not forcefully, just gently. I picture a street, then another street that insists it might be the same one. A number appears, then immediately doubts itself. Paris, apparently, does not want this letter delivered yet. That's fine. I've learned not to argue with cities. Across the room, a group of men are talking about boxing. I don't know much about boxing, but I know enough to recognize enthusiasm. They gesture with their hands, nearly knocking over a glass, then rescuing it at the last second. No one claps. No one cheers. They just nod, as if they've agreed the world makes sense again. I finally take a sip of the tea. It tastes like leaves, which feels honest. Outside, a bicycle bell rings. Once. Not urgently. The envelope stays unopened. The address stays lost. The tea grows cooler by degrees I don't bother counting. For now, this seems like exactly where I'm supposed to be, and I stay. The cafe clock ticks, though it's doing a poor job of it. The second hand hesitates, then jumps ahead as if embarrassed it fell behind. I decide not to trust it. Time behaves differently indoors anyway, especially in places where people sit still on purpose. The man at the next table finishes his drink and keeps the glass in his hand longer than necessary. He's listening to something. Not a conversation exactly, more like the way the room breathes when no one is paying attention. A woman walks in carrying a small bundle wrapped in a scarf. For a moment, I think it's a baby. Then the bundle moves and reveals itself to be a very offended cat. The cat blinks slowly, as if cataloging grievances for later use. The woman apologizes to it under her breath. The cat does not forgive her. Paris in the 1920s is full of animals that appear to belong to no one and everyone at the same time. Dogs nap under cafe chairs like they own the furniture. Cats drift through doorways with opinions. Pigeons conduct business meetings on rooftops. Outside, a delivery cart rattles past, pulled by a horse that looks older than several governments. Its hooves make a sound like punctuation. A period. Another period. I glance again at the envelope. It hasn't changed, which feels reassuring. The seal is intact. The heart pressed into the wax slightly off-center, as if the person who made it didn't want perfection. That feels important. At another table, two men argue quietly about art. One insists painting should show the world as it is. The other insists the world doesn't deserve that much honesty. They both sip their drinks as if this disagreement has happened before and will happen again. This is Paris after the war. Everyone carries something invisible. Some people hide it in music, some in paint, some in cafes where no one asks questions. I take another sip of tea. It's cooler now, more cooperative. The waiter returns and sets down a small plate without asking. On it sits a biscuit shaped like a flower. I'm not sure if it's for me. I wait a moment. No one claims it. Eventually, I nod once in its direction. That seems to settle the matter. Outside the window, the street lamps glow softly, turning the damp pavement into a ribbon of light. A couple passes by, laughing about something that clearly isn't very funny anymore, but they're committed to finishing the laugh anyway. I try again to remember the address. Not the whole thing. Just one piece. A name, maybe, or a floor number. Instead, I remember the way the envelope felt when it was handed to me. Careful. Hopeful, like it trusted me not to rush. That helps more than an address ever could. For now, the cafe holds me. The tea waits, the letter rests, and Paris keeps pretending it doesn't know where it put things. The cafe grows quieter without announcing it. No one leaves all at once. The sound simply thins, like fog lifting one careful layer at a time. A chair scrapes softly somewhere behind me. Not the sharp sound of impatience. The polite kind, meant not to disturb anyone's thoughts. I notice a man near the door folding a newspaper with great seriousness. He aligns the edges, then aligns them again. He seems to believe accuracy matters, even when the news itself rarely is. The woman with the cat adjusts her scarf. The cat does not move. It has decided the position is acceptable and will remain so until further notice. I finally taste the biscuit. It's slightly dry. Not unpleasant. The kind of biscuit that expects you to have tea nearby and planned accordingly. Outside, Paris continues its slow evening rituals. Shopkeepers pull shutters halfway down, just in case. A street musician tunes a violin but never quite begins. Someone laughs, then catches themselves, as if remembering something important and private. This is a city learning how to live again. The war is over, technically. But endings don't arrive all at once. They come in pieces. People here fill cafes not just for food or drink, but to be seen existing, to sit in public and prove, gently, that they are still here. I shift slightly in my chair and feel the envelope press against my palm again. It's patient, more patient than I am. I wonder briefly who it's for. Not the name, the kind of person. Someone hopeful, I think. Someone who wrote a letter instead of saying nothing. That narrows it down very little. A waiter passes by humming under his breath. The tune is unfamiliar, possibly unfinished. I like unfinished things. They leave room. At the bar, two men argue about whether cafes should stay open later in the evenings. One says yes, because the nights are lonely. The other says no, because people need somewhere to go home to. They never resolve it. They simply agree to disagree and order another round. The cafe clock ticks again. This time, it behaves itself. I glance once more toward the window, watching reflections mix with reality. Street lamps blur into faces. Faces blur into memory. For a moment, I consider standing up. Trying again. Walking the streets until the address remembers me instead. But the tea is still warm enough. The chair still holds. The letter still waits. So I stay a little longer. Eventually, the cafe door opens again. Not dramatically. Just enough to let in a draft that smells faintly of rain and stone. Two people step inside, shaking the cold from their coats as if it might take offense and leave. One of them laughs too loudly at nothing in particular, then lowers their voice out of habit. Paris evenings encourage that sort of adjustment. The cat is still unimpressed. It opens one eye, considers the newcomers, and closes it again. Decision made. I finish the last of the tea. The cup is only warm now, but I hold it anyway. Letting go feels unnecessary. The waiter clears an empty plate from a nearby table and hums again. It might be the same tune as before. It might be a continuation. Music here doesn't always need a beginning. I notice a woman at the bar writing something on the back of a receipt. She pauses often, staring into the middle distance like she's waiting for permission from the air itself. When she writes again, it's only a few words at a time. Paris is full of people pretending not to be writers. Some of them are very convincing. Outside, the street has grown darker, though the lamps do their best to argue otherwise. Reflections stretch across the glass, layering cafe life over passing shadows. For a moment, it's hard to tell who is inside and who belongs to the street. That seems appropriate. I shift the envelope from one hand to the other. The paper has softened slightly from the warmth of my palm. It no longer feels like an object, more like a responsibility that has learned how to wait. Someone at a nearby table mentions Valentine's Day in passing. Not romantically, practically. There's talk of crowded florists and inflated prices, of expectations that arrive whether you invite them or not. I wonder if the person meant to receive this letter is worrying about that sort of thing, or if they're doing something much quieter, something that doesn't require flowers at all. The cafe clock ticks again. Steady now, as if it's settled into the evening. I consider asking the waiter for directions. Then I imagine the answer unfolding into 3 different possibilities, none of them agreeing with each other. Paris is generous that way. So instead I sit, I watch. I let the city breathe around me. The address will return when it's ready. They always do. The rain begins without asking permission. Not suddenly. Just a soft tapping at first, like someone testing the surface of the evening to see if it will respond. Paris answers by shining. Cobblestones darken and reflect the lamps until the street looks twice as long as it really is. Footsteps slow. Umbrellas appear from nowhere, opening with small sighs. The cat outside the window has relocated to a drier chair. It curls its tail neatly around itself, satisfied with the decision. No drama, just efficiency. Inside, someone sets a newspaper down and forgets about it entirely. Another person finishes a conversation mid-thought and lets the rest dissolve into the hum of the room. I rest the envelope on the table this time instead of holding it. It lies there calmly, as if it's decided to trust the furniture. The wax seal has softened just a bit from the warmth of the cafe. The heart shape is still there, less sharp around the edges. That feels right. The waiter stops nearby and asks if I'd like anything else. His tone suggests he already knows the answer. I say no, but I thank him anyway. He nods, as if gratitude is a currency he accepts freely. Across the room, a couple plays a quiet game with sugar cubes, stacking them carefully and knocking them down again with deliberate slowness. They laugh once, not because it's funny, because it's shared. The cafe clock marks another minute, then another. I try the address again. Not the street, not the number, just the feeling of standing somewhere unfamiliar with something important and trusting that it will eventually make sense. That part I remember clearly. Outside, the rain settles into a steady rhythm. Inside, the warmth deepens. The envelope waits. The city waits. And for now, so do I. The rain settles into something steadier now. Not heavy, just confident. It taps against the window in small, polite patterns, each drop briefly visible before it joins the others and disappears. Paris listens. The cat outside has closed its eyes again, not asleep, just resting them. There's a difference, and the cat knows it. Inside, someone stirs sugar into a cup long after it has dissolved. The spoon keeps circling anyway, as if it's hoping repetition might improve the outcome. I slide the envelope a little closer to the edge of the table. Not because I plan to leave, just to see how it looks from there. The heart-shaped seal catches the light for a moment, then dulls again. Wax is honest that way. It never pretends to shine forever. A man near the window begins telling a story that doesn't seem to have a destination. He pauses often, corrects himself, starts again from a different angle. No one interrupts him. Everyone understands the rules. This is how evenings work here. You're allowed to wander, even in conversation. I realize I've been listening to the room instead of thinking about the address. That feels like progress. Somewhere nearby, a radio plays softly. Not loud enough to identify the song, just enough to remind everyone that music exists, even when it isn't the main event. The waiter glances toward the door, then back at the tables, as if counting how many stories are still in progress. He decides to wait. Outside, a carriage rolls past slowly, wheels whispering against the wet stone. The sound lingers longer than the carriage itself. I hold the cup again, though it's empty now. The warmth has faded, but the shape remains familiar in my hands. That's how some moments are. They stay useful even after they're finished. The letter hasn't gone anywhere. Neither have I, and the night, it seems, is in no hurry at all. The cafe begins to feel fuller without actually filling up. People lean closer to the tables. Voices soften further, as if the room itself has decided to listen. Someone opens the door briefly, letting in the scent of rain and cold stone again. It slips across the floor and settles near my shoes before fading. Paris has a way of leaving reminders like that. I notice the envelope has shifted slightly on its own. Not much. Just enough to suggest the table isn't perfectly level. Nothing here ever is. Outside, the cat finally stretches, arching its back in a slow, deliberate motion. It steps down from the chair and disappears beneath a neighboring table, tail flicking once before vanishing from sight. Problem solved. Shelter found. I smile at that. Animals rarely overthink solutions. Inside, a couple stands to leave. They pause halfway to the door, arguing quietly about whether they've forgotten something. They haven't, but they take another moment anyway, just in case. The cafe clock ticks again, still behaving. I run my thumb along the edge of the envelope, feeling the paper's faint texture. It was folded by someone who took their time. Each crease deliberate, each corner pressed with care. That kind of attention doesn't rush well. Across the room, a man removes his hat and sets it beside him, as if the evening has officially crossed into staying a while. Another man lights a cigarette, shielding the flame with his hand like it's something fragile. Outside, umbrellas tilt and weave around one another, moving with the slow choreography of people who have nowhere urgent to be. I consider standing again, just briefly, testing whether the address might return if I move. Instead, I stay seated and let the thought pass. Some things arrive only when you stop asking them to. The letter waits, the rain continues, and Paris, content with all of it, carries on being exactly what it is. At some point, the cafe decides it is officially night. Nothing changes all at once. The lamps glow a touch warmer. Voices dip another notch lower. Someone yawns without covering it and then looks mildly surprised, as if sleep arrived earlier than expected. Outside, the rain eases into something finer, still present, less insistent. The street looks calmer now, reflections smoothing out where puddles have settled into their final shapes. A few umbrellas close, others linger just in case. I turn the envelope over in my hands. Not to open it, just to feel its weight again. Letters carry more than words. They carry decisions, the choice to say something instead of letting it remain unspoken. I think about how many letters must have passed through Paris in this decade alone. Notes slipped into coat pockets, messages sent across streets instead of years, words written by people trying to remember how to hope without being loud about it. At the table behind me, someone mentions Hemingway. Not reverently, casually, as if he were just another man who drinks too much coffee and argues about sentences. That feels accurate. The waiter moves quietly now, stacking cups with care. He glances at me once, then leaves me alone. Some people understand when a moment doesn't want company. I rest my elbows on the table and lean forward slightly. The wood is cool beneath my sleeves, solid, reliable. Outside, the rain finally stops. The city exhales. Somewhere out there, the address still exists, written down, waiting to be remembered. But here, in this cafe, nothing feels unfinished. Not yet. The cafe has thinned now, not emptied, just softened at the edges. A few tables sit unclaimed, their chairs angled slightly inward, as if waiting for someone who might still arrive. The kind of optimism furniture is allowed to have. Outside, the street glistens without moving much. Rainwater gathers in the shallow places and stays there, reflecting the lamps in long, wavering lines. Nothing rushes to drain away. I turn the envelope over again, noticing how the paper has picked up the faintest curve from my fingers. It's no longer perfectly flat. It has memory now. That feels appropriate. A man near the back of the cafe clears his throat, then decides against speaking. He lifts his cup instead. The moment passes without ceremony. Paris is very good at that. I think about how letters travel, not just through streets, but through hesitation, through doubt, through the quiet question of whether words are still needed once they're written. Some letters are delivered immediately. Others take longer routes. Some never quite arrive, yet still manage to mean something. The waiter begins wiping down the counter in slow, careful strokes. Not closing, just preparing for later. The cat does not return to the window. Wherever it has settled seems to have met its standards. I glance once more toward the door. For a moment, I imagine the address waiting just outside. Tucked into a shadow, leaning patiently against a lamppost. It doesn't appear. That's all right. The night feels complete enough without it. I place the envelope back in my coat pocket, not to hide it, just to keep it warm a little longer. Some things aren't lost. They're just resting. The cafe clock marks another quarter hour, though no one seems to notice. Time has become a background detail, present but no longer demanding attention. I rest my hands on the table, feeling the faint rings left behind by cups that were once there. Evidence of other evenings, other pauses. Paris collects those quietly. Outside, a carriage passes more slowly than before, as if the driver has realized there's nowhere urgent to be. The horse lowers its head slightly, resigned but unbothered. The rhythm of hooves fades into the damp air and does not hurry back. Inside, the remaining patrons speak in murmurs now, the kind of voices meant only for the people sitting closest. Everything else is allowed to drift. I think about the person who wrote the letter. Not what they look like, not where they live, just the moment they decided to write instead of waiting. That moment matters more than delivery ever could. The envelope stays in my pocket, resting against my chest. Not heavy, just present. Somewhere in the room, a chair is turned upside down and placed carefully on a table. Another follows. The cafe isn't closing yet, but it's beginning to imagine itself doing so. I finish the last sip of tea that was never quite finished. Cold now, still comforting. I consider standing again. Really consider it this time. But the thought arrives with no urgency attached, which makes it easy to let go. Outside, the rain has stopped completely. The street shines anyway. The address is still missing, but the night has been generous. And for now, that feels like enough. The cafe reaches that quiet point where everyone remaining seems to belong there. No one accidental, no one rushing through. A man near the window folds his coat over the back of his chair instead of putting it on. A small decision. A clear one. The waiter moves more slowly now, stacking things that don't strictly need stacking yet. Preparing, but not insisting on an ending. I shift in my seat and feel the envelope settle more comfortably in my pocket, as if it has adjusted to the shape of the evening. It doesn't press, it doesn't demand. It simply stays. Outside, someone pauses beneath a street lamp and looks up at the sky, as though expecting it to say something in return. It doesn't. The person nods anyway and continues on. Paris has taught people how to accept silence without taking it personally. Inside, a radio clicks off. No announcement. Just the quiet return of the room's natural sounds. Cups, breath, wood against wood. I notice how warm the cafe still feels, even with fewer people. Heat lingers in places where it's been invited to stay. I think again about the address. Not the words. The intention behind it. Someone believed enough in timing to write it down. Believed enough in me to hand it over, That trust doesn't disappear just because the street name has gone temporarily missing. I rest my palms on the table once more, grounding myself in the grain of the wood. Every scratch tells a story that didn't ask to be recorded. That's most stories, really. Outside, footsteps pass without echo. Inside, the air settles. The night is not finished yet, but it isn't asking anything new of me either, and so I remain. The cafe settles into its final version of the night. Not closed, just reduced to essentials. A few lights are dimmed without comment. The remaining ones glow more steadily, as if they've decided to stay awake for whoever is left. I notice how my breathing has slowed without my permission. Each breath arrives, pauses briefly, then leaves again. No effort required. Outside, the street has nearly emptied. Footsteps pass occasionally, but they don't linger. The city feels folded inward now, resting. I reach into my pocket and touch the edge of the envelope again. I don't take it out. I don't need to. Just knowing it's there is enough. Somewhere in Paris, the address still exists. Pinned to a wall, written in a book, remembered by someone who expects nothing more than time. I think about how Valentine's Day tends to make people rush, how it convinces them love is louder than it needs to be. But letters like this don't hurry. They wait patiently for the right quiet moment. The waiter glances at the clock and nods to himself. He wipes the counter once more, slower than before. No one complains. I rest my chin briefly on my hand, then straighten again. Not tired, just comfortable. The cafe hums softly, like it's content with how the evening turned out. Nothing was delivered. Nothing was lost. And somehow, that feels exactly right. By the time the cafe truly decides it's closing, it doesn't announce it with anything dramatic. No bell, no sudden clatter. Just the quiet choreography of chairs being nudged closer to tables, the gentle scrape of a broom somewhere behind the counter, and the way the lamps seem to lean in a little more, as if they're tired of lighting empty air. The waiter comes by and pauses at my table, looking at my cup with the respectful expression people reserve for objects that have done their job well. He doesn't ask if I want more tea. He asks instead if I'd like a little water before I go. That feels very Paris. Practical kindness dressed up like it's no big thing. I nod, and he returns with a small glass that catches the lamplight. The water tastes like nothing in particular, which is the best kind. A clean reset for the mouth, like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. Outside the window, the street looks freshly arranged. The cobblestones still shine from the earlier rain, each stone reflecting the lamps in soft, uneven bands. Somewhere down the way, a man walks his bicycle instead of riding it, as if he's decided the night deserves less speed. A cat, possibly the same one from earlier, possibly an entirely different cat with the same expression, moves along the edge of the street with the calm authority of something that pays no rent and yet owns everything it touches. It pauses to sniff at a dropped crust of bread, rejects it with mild disdain, and continues on without looking back. I admire that kind of selectiveness. I should practice it more often. I accept too many thoughts that aren't worth keeping. The waiter returns again, this time with my coat in hand. I don't remember taking it off. I must have. The cafe has been soothing me into small forgetfulness all evening. The good kind. The kind where your mind stops gripping the world so tightly. He holds the coat out like it's an invitation, not an instruction. I stand slowly, because there's no reason to do it quickly. My chair gives a soft creak that sounds like it's been waiting to make that noise all night. I slip my arms into the sleeves and feel the remaining warmth of the room gather around me like a last friendly gesture. On my way toward the door, I pass a table where 2 sugar cubes remain stacked in a little tower, abandoned mid-game. They've survived somehow, a tiny monument to not finishing things and being fine with it. Near the counter, a small vase holds a single flower, something pale and stubborn, refusing to look wilted even after a long day. I don't know what kind it is. A few petals have dropped, and they look like little paper commas on the wood. Outside, the air is cooler than I expect. Not cold exactly, just awake, the kind of air that makes you aware of your own breath. I take one slow inhale and taste the city. Damp stone, old smoke, late bread, and the lingering perfume of something floral that may have been someone's collar just a moment ago. Paris at night is quieter than the stories say. The stories always want it to be louder, more glamorous, more musical, more obviously significant. But the real Paris is full of small sounds. A distant laugh, a carriage wheel, a door closing softly, a dog's tags jingling once and then stopping. I walk a few steps along the sidewalk and pause beneath the cafe awning, letting the last drip of water fall from its edge. It lands on the cobblestones with a tiny tap, like a polite reminder that the rain still owns the schedule around here. And I remember the envelope, not the address, not the missing street name. The envelope itself, the weight of it, the fact that it's been resting against me all night, patient and unbothered. I reach into my pocket and pull it out. The heart-shaped seal is still intact. For a moment, I consider opening it. Not because I should. Not because it's my letter. But because the impulse arrives. Curious and human. The desire to know what's inside something that has traveled through time in your care. I don't do it. I'm not always good at rules, but I'm good at this one. Instead, I turn it over and look at the handwriting again. The ink has tiny variations, a little heavier on certain strokes, lighter on others, like the writer was either very careful or very unsure, or both. That's the truth of most Valentines, I think. People talk about romance as if it's bold, but most real affection is quiet. A little worried, hoping it doesn't take up too much space. I start walking again, slower than the city would require, but exactly the pace the night seems to prefer. I pass a lamp-post with an old poster partially peeled away. I can't read the whole thing, but I catch enough to see it's about a performance. Music, maybe. Paris has performances the way other places have weather. It just happens. It's always somewhere. A man in a flat cap stands outside a doorway, offering cigarettes in a small box like he's presenting jewels. He watches me pass and lifts his chin slightly, not in greeting, more like acknowledgement. Yes, you exist. I see you. Carry on. I nod back because it feels correct. A dog, small, scruffy, optimistic, tugs at its leash, determined to investigate a puddle that is clearly not going anywhere. The owner lets the dog win. It's late. Nobody needs a power struggle with a puddle. A bicycle rings its bell once behind me, but not sharply. A gentle bell. A bell with manners. I step aside and let the rider glide past. The bicycle's tires whisper over wet stone, and for a moment the sound makes me think of pages turning. I try the address again, not hard, just lightly. And this time, something flickers. Not a full street, not a number, just a name. Or the beginning of one. It arrives the way sleepy memories do. Soft around the edges, not entirely sure it wants to stay. Rue dash dash. No, that's too easy. Too many streets begin that way. Then a different fragment. A building with a narrow entry, the kind with a small courtyard behind it. Ivy, a stairwell, a brass number plate worn smooth where fingers have touched it for years. And then, like a shy animal stepping into view, the detail finally holds still long enough for me to see it clearly. I stop walking. I actually laugh once, quietly, because of course that's how it happens. After hours of tea and sitting and waiting and refusing to wrestle the city, the address decides to show up the moment I'm not trying to force it. Paris has a sense of humor. It's subtle, but it's there. I look down at the envelope again, as if it might confirm what my mind just offered me. It doesn't. Paper rarely argues. I turn my body slightly toward the direction my memory suggests, down a street that curves away into a darker ribbon of light. I take one step, then another, and I realize something. I could deliver it now. I probably could. The address feels steady enough. My feet feel willing. The night is quiet. It would be simple, but there's a softness in the moment that makes me pause. Not because I don't want to finish the task, because I suddenly understand that this story, this particular sleepy little stretch of time, has been about the waiting, not the delivery. The café, the rain, the cat, the sugar cubes, the way Paris rearranged itself around me until I stopped resisting it. That was the point. The delivery can happen. The Valentine will arrive. It will. I believe that. But this moment, right now, is the part that feels like it belongs to the night. And as I stand there, holding the envelope, letting the lamplight warm the wax seal for the briefest second, I feel a familiar shift in the air. Subtle at first, almost like the quiet pressure change before a door opens. I exhale slowly. My hand relaxes around the envelope. And only then, only at the very end, when the night has fully settled, do I feel it. The gentle hum. A small, steady vibration in my palm, as if something patient has decided it's time. A faint glow blooms there too, soft and contained. Not bright enough to startle anyone, just bright enough to be undeniable. I close my fingers around the source of it, letting the light spill between them in thin, warm lines. For a moment, the cobblestones shine a little brighter. The lamplight seems to pause, and Paris, polite as ever, does not ask questions. I take one last look down the street where the address waits. Then I take a slow breath in, and another. The glow grows steadier. The hum deepens, gentle and sure. And the city blurs at the edges, like a photograph being carefully tucked away into an album, saved for later. Not lost, just filed in the quiet place where all these boring adventures go, until it's time to visit another one.